Now we continue our discussion on constants in C. How to define constants? We already know this thing, that how to define constants using hash define. We would be able to define constants like, for example, 3.14159, which is a famous irrational number called pi. We would be able to use this irrational number in our code by simply using a macro name associated with it by using hash define. Maybe we want to calculate the area of circle. Maybe we want to calculate the circumference of circle. In that case, writing this constant value multiple number of times would be a little bit cumbersome. We can simply use this macro instead of using this constant value. And that is the use of hash define, or you can say greatest advantage of hash define that we already learned in our previous lesson. Now in this lesson, we consider another way of defining constants by using const keyword. Now where do we use this const keyword? Let's try to understand this thing. We would be able to use this const keyword in front of a variable. For example, we can define a variable like int var by simply putting a const keyword in front of that variable. We won't be able to change its value anywhere in the code. Now this is quite weird. Suppose for example, we want to assign a different value to a variable, then we won't be able to do that, because when we define it as a constant, we won't be able to change its value. And that is the meaning of a constant, right? Constant simply means that this value, whatever is being assigned to a variable, is permanent and we won't be able to change it. It's just a read-only value, and that is the meaning of a constant. Sometimes this functionality we require from a variable, and we simply put const keyword in front of some data type and some variable name. Let's understand this thing with the help of code. I define a variable and assigned it a value is equals to 67. And I'm simply going to print this value with the help of printf function. Let's see what would be the output. You got 67 as the output, right? Now I'm going to assign a different value to this variable. And I'm simply going to print this value. Let's see what would be the output. It is equals to 57. We would be able to assign any number of time values to it as whenever we want in our code. That is the meaning of a variable. It is not necessary that once we initialize with this value, we won't be able to assign any different value later in our code. Now if we put a const keyword in front of this variable, then let's see what will happen. We got an error. Assignment of read-only variable. You can see over here in the build messages tab that error is produced, which is assignment of read-only variable var. Because we are trying to assign a different value to it, which is after the initialization step. We already initialize it with value is equals to 67, and now this becomes a constant. We won't be able to change its value further in the code, and that is why this kind of error is produced, which is read-only variable assignment, right? And we won't be able to do such things in our code. And that is the meaning of a constant. If we put this variable outside of this main function, then of course there is obviously the rule of scope in this case. This variable is visible within this function only, right? If we try to change the value of this variable in this function, then definitely it will produce the error. We can also declare this variable as global, and no function would be able to assign value to it. That is the functionality of the constant variable. By simply putting a const keyword in front of a variable name, we would not be able to assign any different value to it forever in the code.